hurricane insurance is more expensive. So if you live in an area that's not as likely, but still in fucking Florida, where your entire state sticks into the fucking Gulf and fucking is hit by hurricanes all the goddamn time, and flooding occurs everywhere there, just not as bad as usual, and you don't have that insurance, well, then you're the fucking dumbass that did that. You reap what you sow. Get fucking flood insurance if you live anywhere in Florida.
But that's
Topic 1. Hurricane Ian has just devastated Florida. It has either left homes utterly destroyed or completely uninhabitable. Many of its victims lack flood insurance because they don't live in areas considered high risk. But with climate change increasing the scale of damage, flood zones are difficult to predict. Congress sometimes provides assistance, but this can take a long time to arrive and is often difficult to obtain due to red tape. So, as a climate change mitigation effort, should the U.S. federal government guarantee assistance to its citizens when hit by hurricanes? If these natural disasters will simply be a fact of life going into the future, would it not benefit the economy and society to have the reassurance that this devastation will be covered? Or should property owners be held completely liable for damages even when it would be highly unlikely for it to befall them? So yeah, we're seeing this more and more. We could extend this to other natural disasters. I was going to focus on hurricanes, but we see places completely outside of anything that looks like a flood zone get hit with hurricanes, and people are kind of shut out of luck. You got to assume, you got to hope you'll get some hope you get some help from the government. But even then, when they put those programs in place, they have all these requirements, and sometimes people fall short of them for whatever reason. So should we take a more proactive approach and just say, hey, if you get hit by something like this, we've got your back? All right, let's open it up we'll start with Ashley. You're muted.
leave you muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think at least for a lot of people that like capitalism and like really stand by it, I think that a lot of what capitalism is built on is like rational actors making decisions. And I think that we're getting into situations where a rational actor, there's no way that they would like buy insurance for something when they're at no risk, right? I think of it like if a meteor suddenly crashed on your house, right? Like you would have never bought meteor insurance, right? That wouldn't be rational. So I think that for these types of situations, it makes a lot of sense to help bail out and like help out people when it's not fair for them to like have expected it to happen. I don't know. So I'm very much for like the government kind of helping out with that. And I also think that it will help towns survive if they're like destroyed and not just like disappear.
Thank you. Scott?
So the first thing we have to talk about is the question of, is climate change actually causing more hurricanes to hit the Atlantic coast? The answer is unequivocally no. Since the 1900s, we've had a steep decline in hurricanes hitting the Atlantic coast, and the best estimation in terms of severity is 1 to 3% more severe on average than they have been since 1900. And climate deaths obviously are drastically declining due to technology and capitalism, right? So the idea that like these specific areas are in more risk to climate change is just a myth promulgated by circle jerk, fear porn media and politicians that want your money to garner action. So let's talk about the insurance. So if it is true that it is very unlikely that a hurricane hits these areas, then insurance should be cheap. If it is not true that it is very likely, then insurance should be high, but that proves that it is likely that these areas are hit by hurricanes. The only way that this price demand equation can actually be affected in some way is not climate change or hurricanes, but instead the subjectivity of price. And so what that means is that people believe that they're in fear of being hit by a hurricane that they're not actually going to be hit by, or they're unlikely to be hit by. And so the demand for high cost hurricane insurance goes up despite the risk being relatively low. So, in fact, the only thing that can be negative here is not the lack of government resources The only things that can be negative are people that are in highly likely to get hit by a hurricane, that live in a hurricane area and are so fucking stupid they don't get hurricane insurance, or B, people like you putting out misinformation about climate change increasing the likelihood of hurricanes, thus making the subjective need for hurricane insurance higher and increasing the price without a relative increase to risk. So what I would argue is if you live in fucking Florida, get hurricane insurance, you fucking idiot. And if you keep promulgating misinformation about climate change and hurricanes, that you're actually doing harm to people by subjectively engaging in the fear porn that makes these insurance industries rich.
Did I say this increases the number of hurricanes? I don't know. Okay, let's go to Corey.
Well, there's lots.
Sorry, that's not what I said.
Not what he said.
But yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's not my place to unpack it right now. But from what I understand, based off of the article, and again, I'm a filthy Canadian, so I probably don't have a great understanding of the insurance system in the United States. But based off what was stipulated in the article, like flood insurance, like is largely provided by like the government, at least in Florida, and that like the majority of people like do not get flood insurance. As in, like in principle, if what's got outlined in terms of insurance is actually like feasible and actually is implemented, I can see that as a plausible solution. But given the current state of affairs now, based off of my understanding of insurance or the lack thereof in these areas, I would use pretty much the exact same argument that I used, I guess, a few panels ago when it came to the floods in Pakistan, where, like, I think the people of Pakistan, for lack of a better term, require or should have climate reparations in terms of either whatever support, aid, charity, whatever term you want to use. And I would actually pretty much, I'm in favor of the same thing, as in there are going to be, I think, way more effects of climate change, which is a real thing, which is occurring, which is largely increasing extreme weather events, that is having a devastating effect globally, and that flooding is not the only issue, and that as a result of the inaction, some sort of remedial action needs to take place in order to deal with all the consequences, since we actually haven't solved or haven't taken steps to solve the issue. So I'm just in favor of largely, just as I'm in favor of climate reparations for Pakistan, I'm in favor of climate reparations for people in the United States that are experiencing extreme weather events.
Thank you. Like that.
So the point of insurance is to share risk. That's the idea. Whenever you purchase a house in a high-risk area, or really purchase a house anywhere, or do almost anything, you are engaging in an activity which carries risk. And if you own property, that carries monetary risk with it. That's one of the burdens that comes with owning things. So the landlords that everyone likes to rail upon, they have to deal with that risk as well, and that they could lose their entire investment. That's the point, because they own it, they're able to reap the benefits of it, and so it makes sense that they also carry the risk of it. You could buy insurance to share that risk, but ultimately that risk is yours and yours alone. The unpopular truth is that by constantly paying for the effects of the environment for one particular area, you are subsidizing people living in that area. If I live in areas with tough soil, like Montana or Tennessee, it may be more expensive to dig basements in those areas. We don't expect everyone else in the country to chip in and help them build their basement just because they don't get to have basements, because they chose to live in that area. That's one of the downsides of living in an area with tough soil or risking a purchase in an area with tough soil, is that you're not going to be able to do things that you'd be able to do if the environment was a little bit more favorable. In the same way that if somebody lives in an area that has a lot of rain or hurricanes, we shouldn't expect everyone else in the country to chip in and pay for weatherproofing their house or paying for their increased insurance premiums so they can enjoy to live in a multi-million-dollar beach estates in their wonderful beach paradise. And I mean, the beach estates in Florida are pretty ridiculous when we're talking about where wealthy people decide to live in this country. Fundamentally, people should be responsible for the costs that they incur living there. There's no reason why people who choose to live a less exciting, safer life in the Midwest, instead of this sort of risky beach life, why they should be punished for their decision by subsidizing somebody else to live where they want to live. This should be handled by a mix of weatherproofing and private insurance by the people who live there. People should pay for their own risks just in the same way they can get the benefits from the properties that they own.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, Revolution Underground.
I believe you're muted.
Revolutionary, you're still. Can you hear us? I don't think we can hear you. So we'll continue on. Go ahead, Josh.
Sure, yeah, I don't know what happened to not digital, Revolutionary Underground. But yeah, I will preface this by saying, by introducing my politics. I believe a strong capitalistic system must be met with an equally strong democratic governing system. In that specific worldview, I view this problem through two lenses. Through a capitalist lens, I see Hurricane Ian as an affront to our capital systems by resulting in volatility in their respective local economies. From a democratic lens, or how this disaster relief will help our democracy, will help our democracy flourish, is that Americans who would ultimately benefit from this program will have a safety net in case they do have to incur financial losses due to unforeseen circumstances like hurricanes. It is for these reasons it is incumbent on the American government to protect Americans' most valued investments. That's my take.
Thanks so much, Isle.
I was also on the panel with Corey Campbell, and I vehemently refuse that, like, degenerate and just self-defeating and self-effacing policy of climate reparations, so-called, because it's dumb. We shouldn't give our money away, our precious resources, land and treasure away to other places because it gets a little bit more wet than usual over there in like Pakistan or in like south of the equator. That's dumb. But for people who live in our sphere of influence, people who are United States citizens, they deserve every single bit of that treasure in times where it gets rough for them. So I think that, people in Puerto Rico should get more help with their hurricane battery because they get really hit hard in the hurricane systems. And I think Americans, when it comes to natural disasters, because to Lactoid's point, different parts of the country are different, but they do all have different natural disasters that happen. In the very far west, like in California, there's lots of earthquakes because there are lots of like loose fault lines over there. I mean, the Wizard of Oz took place in Kansas, but then a tornado hit the area, and tornadoes do hit as well. So, we don't want like tornadoes hitting the Midwest and like fucking them up because, tornado insurance gets too high either. So I think that we need to prioritize American citizens, make sure that they're okay, make sure that they're protected. I think we should invest in infrastructure that can block these aberrations of nature. And I think that, we can do it if we put our minds to it and we have enough pluck and ingenuity to do so. And I mean, I think we have enough money. I think we've proven by how much aid we give to Ukraine that if we have the will, we can just find the money somewhere or just print it on our own and just do some things with it. So I think that that's not an issue. We should help our American citizens.
That's Lactoid's favorite answer yet. Let's go. Let's try Revolution Underground again.
All right. I assume you all can hear me at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So let's keep in mind that we already do this in a whole lot of areas that are inside the floodplain. We operate the National Flood Insurance Plan and program for a reason, but I would argue there should be limits because at this point, FEMA has been rebuilding people's houses 8 or 9 times. I do think there should be a limit to that. You can't just rebuild in perpetuity over and over and over again in a disaster area. But I also don't want to put the burden on American citizens if their home gets wiped out by a hurricane to all of a sudden be expected to just have the cash on hand to move to another place in another state. But I would say maybe you get 2 rebuilds, and after that, if you want to get that federal insurance backstop money, you need to pick a place that's outside of the floodplain.
Thank you so much. Okay. And finally, our friend Doobie.
I actually find myself, unfortunately, agreeing with Blackwood and Scott on this. I think that if you're in Florida, you've been fed climate change warnings for the last 30 years. Right? Say Florida's going to be underwater. So if at this point you're not buying flood insurance, like it's just kind of on you. You know, you decided not to do it. It's available to you if you're in the state. So hey, sorry, fuck off.
Okay. All right. Open to the panel. Anyone?
Can I start?
I think Doobie made the point right there, man. Fuck.
Yeah, I think
Right. I mean,
Like,
here's
here
my-
in California, like
here you go.
California, we have
Here you go.
earthquakes, right? And it
It-
doesn't happen
it's-
very often that where like an earthquake happens where it causes like millions of dollars of damage, but it happens
Mm.
once in a while. So I have earthquake insurance. Like,
Look,
it's not-
all I can think of is Sam Kinnison's bit from like, I don't know, like 30 years ago, where he talks about us constantly giving food to like people in the desert and he just tells us, you know, move to where the fucking food is. Like, we should not be sending them food. We should be sending them U-Hauls. Like, if you can't afford hurricane insurance, or you can't afford, if you're in an area where hurricane insurance is simply too expensive to exist, and you can't afford to rebuild your home every few years, then fucking move.
I want to add on to that. Like, if you live in Florida, your property values, you can sell your property and you can move somewhere else, right? We're not talking the people,
Right.
people own shit there. We're not talking about like destitute people. You own property in Florida, one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. You could move to a cheaper state.
Let's go to Ashley.
I just want to debunk this claim that you made, Scott. I've
claim?
been doing research I've been like looking into it, and I found some articles I could send you on it. And I can send you some studies on it. And I can probably send you the studies that you're pointing to. But it seems like
Mhm.
definitely climate change has increased hurricanes. It seems like that's pretty. It seems like there
That
is.
wasn't the claim. Unfortunately, you Googled the wrong thing. I didn't say this. I'm specifically talking about the area that we're talking about, which is the Atlantic coast.
Okay, so you would say specifically the Atlantic coast. I will double
Right,
check that
because-
it increased in
yeah.
the Atlantic coast, but I think that I know what you're pointing to because I see the two.
Decrease.
Sorry, I'm telling you that I saw the two studies that talked about the Atlantic coast. I will specifically find your Atlantic coast.
Go ahead.
Oh, anyone else?
Meantime and the in-between time, I think that we should definitely make sure that it's easy for American citizens to afford, because, you know, if it's like such a crucial thing where the state already has like a special cutouts for flood insurance, then I think we need to make sure that everybody knows that it's available. Because, you know, there's lots of things that, you know, there are just opportunities out there that you don't know exist until someone like literally has to pull you aside and say, yo, it's right there. Go get it. Apply for it. It's like just one call from, like, you know, and then you gotta
there's
just
plenty of
get it.
advertising.
They
that
don't want to
happens,
pay for
like,
it.
Yeah, exactly. They say, hey, it's not going to happen. You know, the small chance. It's a waste of money. It's a scam, et cetera. Insurance bad, et cetera. So they just don't get it.
And that's the gamble, right? That's the gamble they chose to make by not buying the insurance, by not sharing that risk.
And it's not
When
that
you're going
expensive,
to buy
right?
property. And also, yeah, it's not that expensive, but
It's
the properties they're
legally
buying are
required
very
in a lot of these in a lot of these areas.
Well, I just have for Lactoid, if you can clarify, because from what I understand, this is just me like trying to learn in terms of like how it works in terms of insurance in Florida. From what I gathered from the article, it's like insurance is generally only offered to those who are in the high risk areas. If I'm mistaken on
No,
that.
that's
thing.
not
Yeah,
true.
you are
Okay.
mistaken. So the article actually specifically says, I want to read from it to make it. I'll keep looking for it, but
Or
essentially,
like if you know Doobie, where my
Yeah,
mistake
typically,
is.
so the way
I found that sentence, by the way, real quick. It must be
Sure.
purchased separately, usually from the federal government. Although most people have the option for purchasing flood insurance, it is required only in government-backed mortgages that sit in areas that
Okay,
the FEMA deems highest risk. So
right.
it's available for most people. Now
But
you can
yeah,
make the
but
argument that it
it's-
should be
but
available
it's-
for everybody, but
Yeah, but it's
required.
mandatory in the high risk areas. Yeah.
Right,
okay.
but it's still available. Now, I'm not even sure it should be mandatory. I think that, you know, if you want to gamble with your incredibly expensive real estate that you're privileged enough to buy in this country, and you want to gamble with that, you know, that's your gamble. The fact that everyone else is going to chip in so you can have your Mar-a-Lago fucking shit? No, like why?
Well,
are
I
we
mean,
doing this?
Mar-a-Lago.
let's be honest. I don't think everyone in that area has a Mar-a-Lago I mean, again,
Well,
I
not
could be
everybody,
wrong.
but it's beachfront property. Like the beachfront property that get hit the hardest, that's like the expensive places.
In
Those
Florida?
are places like,
Yeah.
Florida man is living large.
Florida?
Ashley.
So I looked into it further, just briefly glancing over it, right? So I could be, it's possible that these studies are like completely off and I'm looking at the completely wrong thing. But it seems like you're right. In the Atlantic coast, hurricanes are getting less, but it seems like they're getting more severe, and that's the key. It seems like more Category 5, more Category 4, more Category 5, and it seems like they're increasing in severity. So it does seem like yes, there are less, but it seems like they're worse.
There's no consensus on whether or not there's a significant increase in severity. There
But
is a
there's no
consensus
on that.
There is absolutely consensus on whether or not how many hurricanes have touched landfall on the Atlantic coast. It's a very easy thing to measure.
So,
right? Like
so
the
which
severity.
my question to you is,
severity-
when
Okay,
we're
go
looking
ahead.
at projections, what are you going to point to? Do you have a source or something that you're going to point to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can throw it in the chat.
Yeah, please do. Because I'm looking around and like at least on obviously climate.gov, right? Like it might be a bit biased, right? But I'm looking around.
I'm sure some other sources are going to be biased
So
as well.
I'm looking in. I am genuinely trying to look into it. And I can find your claim, but whenever I find your claim, it seems to be also saying that the severity is increasing. So I'm trying to find your claim isolating.
And who's stating that severity is increasing significantly?
Let me get you the exact study, but it is in climate.gov. I believe it is a study by Roger A. Pale. I can't pronounce that name. I can post this stuff over.
Just give me the
But
journal.
isn't this kind
that's
of
fine.
irrelevant to the actual like topic of
Well,
discussion?
I think it's very relevant if it's
talking about-
if I think that climate change is very relevant to this discussion because if the climate is causing this to be more severe.
So
Talking about
but if it were not the case that the climate change was causing it to be worse in this specific area, would your position change?
Well, my position is that it is getting worse. So if it wasn't getting worse, then yeah, I think my position would slightly change.
But we're talking about the economic implications of climate change. We're not talking about if climate change existed.
No,
but
sorry,
I guess what
No.
I'm trying
Yeah.
to say is
Go ahead, Ashley.
I guess what I'm trying to say is if these hurricanes are becoming more and more unpredictable, I'm putting a lot more onus on an individual if it's predictable and they're not doing the smart thing. Versus a very unpredictable situation, and then they get kind of caught out. I guess my
before we get into like a study war about like what severity means and how we define severity, etc., let's just even the playing field because I feel like we can agree here without going into like all of these different things and kind of detracting from the conversation. So they're getting 1 to 2 miles an hour since 1900 stronger, but they are becoming less predictable. Climate deaths are way down, but property damage that is price inflation adjusted is going up, right? So the unpredictability, as well as let's say, deltas, river deltas being polluted in many ways or degraded in some ways, have made the property damage worse in many ways. So we have increased property damage, decreased deaths, and increase, if you will, in unpredictability. They're becoming more difficult to predict, while the technology it should be easier to predict them, right? Because you would think the meteorology is a science and the instruments would get better. So if you're talking about the onus specifically on individuals to purchase insurance in areas that normally shouldn't get hit, as climate change may potentially be causing them to become more unpredictable, you're right.
Okay.
Right? So I'll just take that. You're
Sure.
right in that specific.
No, and I want to. No, sorry, 1 second, because you called me out specifically at the start of this, and yet I've made no false claims, right? And I think you've just accepted everything that I said within that question, saying that the damage has been increasing, and they are more difficult to predict, and I can pull up. Like, it took me 2 seconds to pull up an article telling exactly how climate change helped strengthen this particular hurricane. So, like, how was I wrong, right? So, calling me a liar here somehow?
Only a little bit. I
Okay,
said
so
you're
I wasn't.
fear mongering. You're
thought
Oh,
you were
fear
lying.
mongering
I'm fear
because
mongering. Great,
you're
thanks.
fear mongering because deaths are down, and because it doesn't actually matter because of the supply and
That-
demand equation with insurance in and of
Sorry,
itself.
nice
There's
try,
no
but
reason. There's no again, no, there's
nice try.
you'd have to actually listen to the whole thing. I understand that
Yeah.
you like to do univariate analysis because your IQ
No,
is about
I'm sorry.
as
No,
high
no,
as
no,
my
no. Look,
AC
it's
setting.
really simple
Listen,
because
Jesus
you tried me. You tried me. Like everything I said within the question was correct. I have sources to say that all the assertions I made were correct. But then you're like, oh, you're pushing
so
you're
let's go
fear
through your
mongering
question.
now about things that I didn't say. All right, great, thanks.
Okay.
Fear
You said-
mongering about the concept of reality. What a novel concept.
Congress sometimes provide, but this can take a long time to arrive and it's difficult to attain due to red tape. 1 second. Should we guarantee federal citizens if you don't if these natural disasters will simply be a fact of life going in the future, would it not benefit the economy and society to have the reassurance that this devastation will be covered? I mean, I guess since this one is worded as a question, I'll take it. I'll just take it.
Okay.
Right? I'll just
All
take it.
Then I'll leave it alone.
The
Then
principal issues still, however, is that if it's really likely that you're going to get hit by a hurricane and it's going to do a lot of damage, right? Then you need hurricane insurance.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily
Is anyone on this
represent an
panel
onus.
disputing that?
That doesn't necessarily represent an onus. Well, they are by saying that we need the government to do it. That's not insurance.
Well, I'm not saying
That's
that, and
taxpayer
I'm
money.
saying something kind of similar, which is I'm saying
Right.
that like if you're
If-
not in a prone area
if
and
it's
it hits you because of
unlikely-
climate change, then like that's not your fault. Like you couldn't have predicted that.
If it's unlikely, right, then it's cheap hurricane insurance, right? So then it's a cheap product to do. And so if it is likely, then it's an expensive product that is necessary, and you either need to move, sell your property if you can't afford the insurance rates, whatever that is, in order to rectify that situation. However,
So
it's important that we recognize that while property damage may be going up in some areas, there is less landfall and there are much, much less deaths. And so it actually
nobody
should
cares
be,
about. I don't think this discussion is
there's
about
also-
deaths. I
there's
don't
also
think it
another
is.
interesting thing. There's also another interesting thing, which is that some of the damage that is done is people that haven't built, like, and I don't know how you lefties want to take this, but like sometimes when hurricane resistant buildings haven't been built and hurricane resistance have been built, those buildings topple and then take out the hurricane resistant buildings because the other buildings don't have those things. And I think this is more of a reason to involve the private insurance industry, because the percentile of hurricane resistant buildings in your neighborhood should affect your insurance rates, as should whether or not your building is hurricane resistant or not. And I think adding more state interference and government red tape is going to make this problem ever more expensive and problematic in a way that would be cheaper, more efficacious, and better for everyone if we just accept the reality that if you don't have money for flood insurance or hurricane insurance and you live in an area where that could happen, you're fucking dumb.
So what I ask, and I'm genuinely asking you this, right? I know that you don't have meteor insurance, right? I guarantee you that you have not bought meteor insurance, right? Let's say tomorrow an asteroid hits your like block and takes out your neighborhood, right? Nobody was harmed, everyone was out and about, right? So it's fine, right? But like your entire block is destroyed, right?
Right.
For
So
the world.
okay, we're doing a hypothetical.
There's
My
a company
God.
selling it. There's a company
one
selling
of
it, by
those-
the way.
It's one of
Oh my
those
God.
common fucking Russian meteoroids, all right? That just hits
Okay.
every now and then in Siberia.
$25. So a Florida company is selling meteor insurance. Pay $25 a year. You get $10 million in coverage.
Okay,
and
but
the
like,
reason
what
is
I'm-
because the market has provided that the risk of a meteor is very low.
Wait, hold on, but
There you go.
You
you
didn't
would
let
actually
me
be
finish my
benefiting if a
statement.
meteor hit your house. Go ahead.
yeah, but
So what-
meteors would actually be covered under like most like home insurance
Yeah,
policies. like,
usually.
standard one.
It'd be
So
considered
I'm
an
doing
active
I'm doing a hypothetical right now, right? So
Something
like,
that's not covered by insurance.
I need
Yeah,
media
Listen,
insurance.
I'm all here
okay,
for it.
then let me finish,
We're-
please. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I didn't bring it up that it
No.
existed.
Oh my god.
Oh my
let
god.
Ashley get
Shut
through
up.
it, and then we
Jesus.
can all move on with our lives here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So,
So,
Scott's been
there-
obliterated
let's
by a
say-
meteor. All right. My fantasies come true.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
let's say you don't have an insurance that covers it. You have insurance that covers every natural disaster except this one, because this one was just not one that like was considered at all a risk, right?
Okay.
So to me, I see it as like it is not at all reasonable for you to ever buy this insurance, right? And for a company, they might tack it on to like some premium deal, but like they're not gonna offer it because it's just not worth offering, right? So I guess what my question
So-
is I think in this case the government probably should bail out this block of people because it just being destroyed, right? Like there's no predictability behind it, right? It's not a dumb decision that the block made. There isn't any decision that the block made, right? There's no reason
Okay,
to think that
so
this would ever happen.
So let me answer your question from several grounds. Number one, I think plenty of insurance companies probably could offer that as an act of God, and that's just one more thing that they get to advertise that might be funny. You know what I mean? Like it very easily, it's of no financial risk to them whatsoever to
They
tack on an
offer
extra
it
50
now.
cents. Yeah. But let's assume you don't have it, right? What I would argue, right, is that taxpayer dollars is stolen money, and I don't believe. Oh damn it, my fucking headset went out. Hold on, give me a second.
Everyone's got tech issues.
Come circle back to me.
Oh, I can't hear you, Prime.
Sorry. Does anyone else want to jump in, or is Scott back already?
I can talk about like in way insurance works here. And the idea is that you have insurance policies that offer like comprehensive coverage, and they may have certain exclusions that you can add back in with endorsements if you want to have extra coverage in certain areas. But generally speaking, like there are home insurance policies you can buy that the rule is they basically cover everything unless they specifically exclude it. And then they give you like a base rate. Here's what you pay. Like it covers basically, you know, everything except for these specific things. And oftentimes flood is left out because, you know, they want you to buy that separately because there's unique risks to that. But there's plenty of comprehensive insurance policies right now that cover, you know, crazy things like meteor strikes or, you know, sinkholes, you know, stuff like that. So I think that this idea that, again, it seems odd to me because, you know, I didn't expect this much of love for landowners, right? I always thought there was like a dislike for landowners and we want to like help renters out. But this seems to me like we want to bail out the landowners for not buying insurance on their properties that they're collecting rent from or living in. But like, aren't we taking rentoids' money and we're sending that over to landowners when we bail them out? Doesn't make sense to me.
I mean,
I'm-
it's just really
I'm
weird
gonna
that you're
add
attacking a
something.
position that I've not said or made. That's all.
And they have insurance. That's why they get the federal backstop.
What?
What?
Did you expand
What's
on
your
that?
point?
Sorry, I wasn't.
They have insurance. That's the only way that they get the federal backstop. Other than that, they get some basic FEMA assistance, but we don't rebuild their homes for them.
Were they?
We have a problem with the FEMA,
The
right? We don't
people who
care if
live
people buy
inside
insurance.
of like the flood zone during hurricanes or during other natural disasters. If you want to widen the conversation,
Do you want to make an argument? I don't understand what you're saying. You're just saying a thing exists. Cool.
you said
What's your argument?
that. Oh, okay. I forget which one of you said it. The whole point is you can't go, well, if they don't buy insurance. No, these people who are in the floodplain who are getting their homes rebuilt by FEMA have insurance. That's why they get the money. I'm not sure what part of that is. I'm not sure what part of that you're having trouble with.
I don't think that's true. Only 18% of Floridians have flood insurance, but FEMA's giving a lot more than 18% of Floridians money. Nobody has an issue with people like cashing out on an insurance policy. I don't think anybody here in this panel has a problem with that. What we have a problem with is people not paying insurance and then like getting money for everyone else for their short-sighted decision to not buy insurance.
The great majority of the money that's getting paid out is going to be paid out through the National Flood Insurance Program. It seems a little bit like we're arguing on the margins here.
But can you imagine a situation in which someone does have flood insurance, both private and through maybe FEMA insurance, but they still don't have enough to cover, you know, what it takes to bring back their house that they just lost?
Definitely. I guess the question becomes, what should we do in that case?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
my question to you,
covered in
that's
the
what I'm
report.
asking.
What should we do
all
in
these
that
policies have
case?
deductibles, right? So like, yeah, you should
I
probably try
would
to get a
say
low
we have
deductible.
to.
And
I
limits.
If
would
your
say we do
deductible
have
is
to
really
set some
high,
sort of standard, but
well, if your deductible is
I
really
mean,
high and you
I
didn't
gave
get
my
enough
initial
insurance to
position
cover
at the
replacing your
beginning,
home, then
where I
again, it's on
told
you.
you that we should probably backstop it the first couple of times. After that, if your house keeps getting demolished and you want this federal backstop, you got to move your ass up out of the floodplain.
Why?
Some of these
Why
places
give
are
them
going.
two
It's
two
going to
homes
become
for taxpayer money?
untenable for people to live in some of these areas, and for us to continue to use federal money to rebuild
Okay, but why
over and
should we
over
give
and
them
But the
over
two
again
market
isn't
homes
can
going to
already
work.
worth of federal money before we say, hey, we're cutting you off?
Yeah,
Sorry, I
that
didn't
makes
hear
no
all of
sense.
that because I was still talking, so I'm not sure why you felt that was the time to ask the question.
You were saying really
Now
dumb
ask
shit, so
it.
I decided to interrupt you. So you
I mean,
sounded like
well,
you
I'm not
said
going to let you
that, hey,
interrupt me just
we
because
let
you got a
them do it two
mouth. So,
times. Let them do it two times, and then if their home keeps getting
and then
demolished,
after
then we say, hey,
that,
you're cut off. Yeah, why
yeah,
would
we
we
do
give
need
them
to
two
cut people
homes
off
worth
at
of
some
federal
point.
money?
Because we've already agreed to do it.
No, we haven't.
People have gotten their houses rebuilt through this program 8,
you-
9, or 10 times.
Are you talking
We
about?
don't need to continue
Are you
doing
talking about
that.
the insurance program, or are you talking about government money separate from the insurance program? Because none of us here have an issue with the insurance program, and the NFIP is an insurance program.
The NFIP is a backstop for the federal insurance program in these floodplains. Those are the majority of the people who are getting hit and are getting their houses washed out.
No,
I mean, we can
insurance
argue on the
carriers pay
margins
into
if
the
you want to,
NFIP.
but
Is
Like,
anyone
it's
here
another risk
against
pool.
insurance people getting paid money when they're when the
I'm
condition of their
sure we
insurance?
do have a difference on where we care about where the money comes from, because I've definitely heard people differentiate between private insurance and money coming from the government.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
maybe we should
that's my
figure
point.
out what
I'll never-
everybody's view on that is and then circle back.
I'll never question a check from the government.
Spoken like a true
Is-
capitalist. Okay.
So
Right.
I want to ask then Doobie a question. Doobie, do you think that you're saying that why should we help a person rebuild their home twice? Okay, then should we help them rebuild once? So we had the situation with I can't remember all these fucking hurricanes. Sandy, I think it was, where like it hit New Jersey and just like wiped out those beach homes, right? Anything that was near the coast was just gone, right?
Yep.
Do you think that we should ever have any governmental assistance at all? Well, when something like that happens, because there was like governmental assistance. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm okay with giving them like emergency supplies, right? Food, water, temporary shelter, right? But beyond that, no, we don't rebuild their homes. Yeah, sorry, your beach home is gone. You didn't get insurance on it, so you fucked up. Go somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey. Most people who live on the shore, or the people that were most affected by Hurricane Sandy, most likely probably did have insurance for their homes. It's the reconstruction of our beaches and our boardwalk that incurred most of the FEMA recovery, I think, in New Jersey.
Too bad they're not privatized.
Should that money
yeah,
be
so-
backstopped by FEMA? Yay or nay?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what a backstop is. Can someone explain that to me? What a backstop is in this context?
So a lot of the time, these insurance policies aren't going to pay out enough for people to rebuild their houses, and we make up the difference using FEMA money.
Okay, so it seems like people have enough to rebuild their houses, right? I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, it's like a top up
Well,
type
no,
of thing.
but the problem is that it's a tax on everybody else, just subsidizing
Yeah,
people
sure.
living in places
Sure.
where they should be paying more for insurance, and so it's a tax on.
They have higher limits.
Sure, we can debate on where our taxes go, sure. But I'm not
Nowhere.
sitting. I'm not sitting here going to debate, whether
Right,
our
like-
taxes
So
should
then,
go towards
right
insurance
there, we
funds.
already do have one person, at least on this panel, who does have a problem with the federal backstop of
Yes.
this
What are you talking
insurance.
Absolutely.
That's what the contention has been this entire time.
Yeah, the
That
idea
has
is
not
that
been what the
welcome to
contention
the
was said,
conversation.
because I
the-
definitely heard one of you say earlier that everybody here is okay with it. No, everybody here
no,
is
so
not okay with it,
everyone,
and we need to figure out what the difference is.
okay, everyone here
Oh
is
my
okay
God.
with like people cashing out on an insurance policy. The idea of what an insurance policy is sharing risk, right? So if I make a contract with somebody, I'm going to pay you this much a year in premiums, and then you're going to give me a policy which will pay up to a certain limit if this thing happens. If that thing happens, they'll pay you up to the limit. There are policies in Florida which will pay for the full replacement value of your house. If you want your house replaced, you should buy that insurance policy. And you should pay the extra premiums because your neighbor, right, who maybe doesn't want to pay that much, maybe they want to gamble, maybe they could just save that money and spend money on maybe gambling or whatever other degenerate shit they do.
Whatever Florida man does.
Yeah, whatever Florida people do, right? And they want to spend the
Right.
money doing that shit. Maybe they don't want to buy the insurance, and now they're putting their property at risk. Like this is, it's incredible. Like this is people's property. And it's yeah, they have rights over it, but like I don't understand why, especially lefties of all people, are so interested in helping people protect their property.
Because they
Using
the
federal
public
money,
voted one
using
day.
federal money. It's like Jesus.
Look, so I want to,
Yeah, just buy a gun.
I want to interrupt here for just a moment and say that, there seems to be this dichotomy of either the private insurance industry can handle this unregulated, or that the government needs to step in with certain funds. And I want to say that there is a third position here, right? Which is, mutual aid. The best people that have done the most work and the most good in terms of like ratio for their resources in Louisiana, for example, after hurricanes, is the Cajun Navy, right? There are private organizations that give money to people, that collect charity, that are there way before Red Cross ever fucking shows up. The Cajun Navy is out there bailing people out in John boats and things like that, and cutting down trees, etc. So I want to make it clear too that just because I'm saying the federal government shouldn't use taxpayer monies to subsidize, with stolen money, subsidize other people in the event of emergencies, and they should get insurance. There are other areas of mutual aid and praxis from organizations and charity that can help these areas as well. So if you're some bleeding heart person that decides that you think these people really need help, then open up your fucking wallet and donate money to the Cajun Navy, and stop telling me that I need to have my money stolen from me so that I can support people living in an area that I don't give a fuck about. I don't give a fuck about your Florida beach house. You just as easily can go live in fucking Georgia or northern Florida where you'll be fucking fine.
So I think
Yeah,
that
but
the issue is
every
this.
community has like a team ready to go and mobilized commandos. Like not everybody can just mutually aid their way out of a flood.
Right. Then donate money to the Cajun Navy because they do things for hurricane disaster relief all the time, and they're the fucking best at it.
I think the framing that you keep using of this Floridian beach house is very fundamentally like not what the main topic is about. It's about the areas that are not like beach houses, the areas that like you wouldn't expect to flood and don't have high risk of flooding. So when you keep pushing it back to like, oh, your beach house flooded, I think you're really changing what the problem is. And you're then pointing to like people that like I wouldn't defend not having flood insurance. But like when we're talking about people that are not in common flood zones, right?
Can you be
I mean, that's
specific
fair.
as
I
to-
sometimes I forget that like to left-wing people, there's a principal difference in terms of whether or not you believe in freedom based off of whether or not someone's rich or poor. And so I'll go ahead and use your examples and say
That's
like,
not at
it's
all
just
what
a
I'm saying.
fucked up
That's not at all what
neighborhood
I'm saying.
where
That's
no one
not at
believes
all
that
what I'm
anything would
saying.
occur.
Can you like not strawman me for like 1 second? So I'm not all saying it's because they're like poor. It could be a mansion like in the hills, right? But the difference here is we're not talking about a beach house. When you're saying beach house, every single time you're saying beach house, right? That has like a connotation to it, does it not? That like has a meaning to it.
Again, I've made this argument multiple times and already addressed this, but let me say it one more time. If it's less likely that a hurricane hits in this area, but still a conceivable outcome, the hurricane insurance is cheaper. If it's really likely, the hurricane insurance is more expensive. So if you live in an area that's not as likely, but still in fucking Florida, where your entire state sticks into the fucking Gulf and fucking is hit by hurricanes all the goddamn time, and flooding occurs everywhere there, just not as bad as usual, and you don't have that insurance, well, then you're the fucking dumbass that did that. You reap what you sow. Get fucking flood insurance if you live anywhere in Florida.
But that's why I guess we're trying. The discussion is around this is areas that aren't expected to be flooded, right? If you would rather, we can move this up north to Georgia, right, or somewhere else.
And
right?
sometimes the weatherman says it's going to be 80 degrees and it's 72. The weatherman's not fucking God. You live in fucking Florida. It's going to be hot.
Okay, but we're
You live in
framing
Florida.
this-
You're going to get hit
we're
by
framing
hurricanes.
this as it's like. I think the framing on this is the problem, right? You keep framing it as like they're stupid for not doing this, when it's like not everyone can afford to have this many insurance policies. Some people live paycheck to paycheck. 2, they're not in areas that are like at all like expected to be flooded, right? And yeah, we're not God, but like I think it's reasonable to say, hey, the entirety of Florida doesn't get flooded every fucking hurricane, right?
Ashley, we
Of
can't.
course not. But listen,
I think the framing needs to be important.
If the capitalist landlord
I
who
don't
gains
care.
profit via resource allocation loses their home because they're living paycheck to paycheck, they should have fucking sold that house long ago if they're
Start
living
renting.
paycheck to paycheck.
Start renting.
If they're a homeowner living paycheck to paycheck and they can't afford to protect their home in the event of a disaster, they should sell their fucking home and use that to invest in a cheaper home. They need to do something. You shouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck and be a homeowner at the same time. It's a bad idea.
And when you control for, and this is the thing, right? So when we're talking about property owners in Florida, we're not talking about like poor people who don't have the means anymore, because we're selecting for a group that is disproportionately wealthy. The median, not even the average, the median home price in Florida in 2021 was $348,000. That's the median.
It's not only homes; it's also businesses.
Yeah, if you're a business,
Why
like
are
you should
running
definitely
a
buy
business
insurance.
without flood insurance?
And why should we be expected to bail out your business because you didn't buy insurance?
So my question to you, like, let's move this over, right? Let's say that you're in Wyoming, right, and you own a coffee shop in Wyoming, right? And like, you know, not many people go to your coffee shop in Wyoming, so like, it's kind of hard to like get business, right? And like, you don't buy flood insurance, and then a random storm happens that floods your entire business, right? Okay, you're fucked. Okay, all your investment's gone.
That's the risk of that's literally. So this is literally the risk of owning
It's
a business.
called capitalism.
Yes, capitalism is
It fucks over someone for something that's completely out of their control that they could have never predicted.
Profit is what you get for investing capital for interest because of the universal time preference. People want something now
and the
as
risk.
opposed to the exact same thing later, and proper resource allocation. What you just described is a bad capitalist that is not engaged in proper resource allocation, and that's why other businesses succeed and some businesses fail, because this dumbass's coffee wasn't good enough for them to get have enough profits in order to fucking purchase flood insurance. They're a shit business giving a shit service. That's why they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they need to fucking fail, and they need to go back to the fucking drawing board.
And they don't have hurricane insurance.
But what I'm trying to say is that like so again, what I would say is if you had to buy all these insurances, right, and they're like excess costs, right, I think that like keeping a business afloat and having a chance at like continuing to make money is probably a really good decision for you, rather than saying, I'm going to quit this business, be out of a job, suddenly like lose kind of like your investment into it. Like, let's say that you were trying to keep it afloat and then you decide it's not worth it. Like, yeah, that money's gone that you put in to keep it afloat, right? And you just lose it, right? You're saying that these people should just get a new job, but like, it's not that simple, right? Like if you've worked
I'm
at
not.
a
What I'm saying
coffee
is you're stealing money from other people that are working via taxation to support a program to help businesses that make stupid decisions and have bad products that don't make them enough money, so that you can help the capitalist class with the individual that's working a regular job. And what I'm saying is your theft is not justified. If they can't afford it, they shouldn't be doing it.
goes over to like an idea of taxation, right? I'm in favor of taxation, so inherently we're gonna never be able to even agree on a like framework of this, because you're gonna always say that's theft. I'm gonna always say it's not theft. So this discussion can't
it's fine.
be
I can
progressed without
stay in the
talking about
consequential.
taxation.
I can stay in the consequentialist framework where I don't bring up the fact that your theft is unjustified, right? We can set that to the side. And let's assume, which we can't logically do, but let's assume that the theft via form of taxation is justified. What you're doing is you're engaging in subsidizing a market that is not profitable, that does not give people the goods and services that they want enough in order to stay afloat. And what you're doing is taking money out of the economy to do that. You're hurting everybody by doing that.
Yeah, you shouldn't
You're
support that.
hurting the people that want good coffee. You're hurting the businesses that do have enough money to provide flood insurance because they make a better product, but instead they have this different form. And hopefully it's not some arbitrary means where we're trying to have an equitable difference in business owners. Who fucking knows how much red tape is involved in there? But you're also hurting regular people who are working because some of their money that they could take out and invest is taken from them to subsidize a company that is shit with their resource allocation. They don't know what they're doing. They're bad business.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, I think saying that it's a good business decision to buy insurance that, like, there's no logical reason to assume that you would ever need, right? I don't know why this is suddenly a bad business decision. It seems like a very
Do you have
logical
renter's
one.
insurance?
Yeah, I do. I'm required by the state
How
of
mu-
California to have it.
How, would you or would you not have renter's insurance if
I probably-
California didn't?
I
Didn't
probably
require
would. But, like, what I'm saying
Why?
is, yeah, because
What is the likelihood that your apartment will be broken into and all of your shit stolen? Is that worth the $11 or $9 a month you pay in renter's insurance?
honestly, with where I tend to live, yes. I think that's likely enough that, yeah. But what I'm trying to describe is, I don't think that that's a fair analogy, because what I would say is that, like, these places don't even have a risk of flooding. Like, Wyoming does not have a risk of flooding in the
Yeah, but
modern.
they have
Obviously
other
they
natural
do,
disasters that
because they flooded. Like,
Yes, but
clearly
that's
there's
because-
a risk of flooding.
But that's what we're trying to get into. Like, the unpredictability of hurricanes is what's causing stuff like that to happen. So what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to bring up an area that's completely away just to see if you would be logically consistent. Then we can move it closer and closer, right? And then we can draw the line there. Well, I'm
So
trying to
I
say-
want to get some other people in. Yeah. So does anyone else want to?
I was gonna
jump-
anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I go ahead. Does anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, because even with moving into like Wisconsin, like I said before, like, you know, they still have their own natural disasters. Like California has the fault lines, so they're prone to earthquakes. The Midwest gets tornadoes. You know, so things like nature. So I would assume those areas probably, if you know, flooding is not a big concern, but there probably are other natural disasters that they do have concerns with, and that we would have the same eye-rolling, eyebrow-raising response to if they didn't have their proper insurance for those things. Like if you're living in California near a fault line and you don't have earthquake concerns, and you know, FEMA has to come in and build your house over for you because, you know, earthquake hit and it fucked up your house. I probably have the same opinion to the people who have their house fucked up in Florida without flooders insurance, you know? So I think it's the same thing.
Can I ask a question just to anybody?
Sure.
I live in Virginia, right? I live in Virginia. Now, in Virginia, we do get hit by hurricanes. They're very rarely do they do a lot of damage, but they do some damage occasionally. People do get that insurance. But let's bring out the scope in terms of natural disasters. Tornadoes, incredibly rare, do very little property damage. Earthquakes, incredibly rare, and when they do register, they're like a 2 or a 3 on the Richter scale. They knock over a couple lawn chairs, right? So in terms of U.S. states safe from natural disasters, Virginia is like really fucking safe from natural disasters unless you live really close to the coast. Why is it that a struggling business or people living in Virginia that chose to settle in Virginia must have why is it that some percentage of businesses, right, are required to fail? Some businesses must be shut down by increased taxation from the government that's completely involuntary to them. But even if it's a 0.1% increase in taxes, that means that at least one business is likely to fail that would have succeeded. Why does that business have to close so that they can subsidize keeping open another business in another area of the country that they're not involved in? Why is it that you want to play tit for tat for balancing the scales of environmental justice to steal money from people who are hardworking Americans in Virginia that don't have these concerns because other people can't afford flood insurance? Why is that acceptable and okay?
I would say it's acceptable and okay because we are the United States of America. There's 50 states, and we also have some territories that, we kind of.
You know who's not feeling real united? The people that are crushed by taxes so that they can save people in California whose businesses are ruined by your government policies. It's not a lot of
Who's feeling
uniting. It's
worse
just
is
a
the
lot of
people who
stealing.
got hit by the hurricanes.
Or people in
They both
DC.
lost their business. They both lost their building. They both lost everything.
Or
Why are they
people in
worse?
DC.
Because they live.
Because losing a little bit of money for taxes and losing your entire building and your home and perhaps people you care for is a little bit of a step above like a small tax increase.
A small tax increase requires a small tax increase. A small tax increase requires that some people, their business is going to fail.
Yeah, because
But like that's the same as buying insurance. That's what you were saying. If you can't afford a small tax increase, isn't that a failing business? Shouldn't we not
Well, no,
subsidize
because
those
if
businesses?
they were succeeding without the increase, but they were on the margins, then they were
Right.
barely skating by, and then the increase knocked them over, and they failed because of that. So I can see
One
that
was
they'll be okay.
involuntary, forced upon them to protect someone else's business.
Well, I would say the same. If Virginia got hit by a horrible flood, right, and all the let's say all the buildings in like the inland of Virginia got destroyed, and people live there, they didn't buy flooders insurance,
Hurricane
right?
Isaac, 2007, it like wiped out Richmond City, and we rebuilt. What about it?
Yeah, I don't think it's reasonable, like from what you're saying, that somebody in the inland would have insurance.
I don't
It
think
wouldn't-
it's reasonable that a coffee shop in Seattle has to close due to government taxation to protect Richmond from a freak hurricane. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, but if a freak hurricane
Wait, so hold
hit
on.
Richmond,
Mary,
I
so
also
does
don't
this
think
only
it's
apply
likely.
to does this only apply to natural disasters? Like Ashley, if somebody broke into your house and stole all your shit, but you didn't have renter's insurance, you think it'd be reasonable for you to be able to reach into like the taxpayer's wallet and buy your shit back?
I'm specifically talking about very unpredictable effects of climate change. That
Getting robbed.
Pretty unpredictable that someone busts open your door and steals all your shit. It's the
I agree,
definition
it's
of unpredictable.
Well, it depends.
I
on
agree,
neighborhood,
it's not
like she said.
likely, but it's also like
Depending where you live.
depending where you live. Also, there's I don't know, maybe I leave my door unlocked one day by accident, right?
Okay,
Is
so you're
is
saying
anybody
people
expecting to
in
get robbed?
low crime rich neighborhoods, they deserve government assistance, but black people in inner cities, that the crime is predictable there, so they shouldn't get taxpayer money.
In general, I think for crime, it's just a different thing, and that you probably should just buy
Why?
insurance for that.
Wait, what?
Yeah, but why is there like
Why?
a different standard there?
Why is there a different standard? Because I think it's logical, right? Like if your stuff's gonna get stolen, or there's even a chance that it can, we're talking about areas where like there's really not been a chance that they flood and then they suddenly flood.
How is it not logical that if you live anywhere in Florida, your shit might flood from a hurricane?
I mean, Florida's a diverse state. There's places that have never gotten
been
hit
to
by a
Florida?
flood.
But you
Just
could, I
look
mean,
at
to
a map.
Scott's point,
Just look
like,
at a map of this fucking swamp known as Florida and watch it fucking stick out into
So
the
does the
fucking
entire
create
so
the
does
Gulf of
all of
Mexico.
Florida flood every single time that fucking hurricane happens?
No, but
No,
most
but
of Florida
it's
gets
also-
hit by the
Every part
hurricane.
Florida flood. I think if you looked at like a map of where flooding happens, right? I think there would be areas where
But
it probably
Nevada
hasn't
doesn't
flooded.
get fucking hurricanes.
Actually, I hate to bring in personal kind of stories into this, but I have a very personal story. I went to college in Florida A&M University. It's a college in Tallahassee, right? And that's a city in Florida. I have to say that I had to miss classes because hurricanes hit us, and hurricanes don't hit Tallahassee that often. So I have to wonder if you've ever been to Florida to certainly understand the intricacies of what you're trying to say. That
So what
most
I'm asking
Florida-
is, did your dorms flood?
did my dorms have to flood?
Well, no, I'm just asking, did they flood? Was flood insurance used there?
I'm sure my dorms were impacted by the floods. I'm not sure if there was any damage incurred now, because we have pretty state-of-the-art dorms.
Probably had sandbags.
Yeah, like we have pretty state-of-the-art dorms because we have fucking hurricane
You live in
insurance.
Florida.
We have like buildings that are built for hurricanes in Florida. Like that's just
I'm
how
just
Floridians
saying,
are.
Florida's also a giant fucking swamp. All right,
Oh
it
yeah.
does not retain water very well. Like like in Virginia, if we get a fuck ton of rainfall, like the soil absorbs a lot of the rainfall. Florida and and like southern Georgia and like southern Mississippi and like southern Louisiana, not the same. Like a little bit of rainfall and that water is like sitting on top of the roads.
I actually really like the analogy to theft, like somebody breaking your house, because it actually makes it's almost directly comparable, right? You have Floridians who are disproportionately wealthy, right? You have the idea of if you live in a super rich, safe neighborhood, you're disproportionately wealthy. Maybe you don't. It's not predictable that you're going to get robbed. So if the idea or the principle is, well, it's not very predictable, so we should pay you back for it. And the idea is, well, if you live in like a rich area, or if you live in Florida, then like it's not predictable in some areas. It just seems to be like a one-to-one analogy there, right? Like why shouldn't we be paying off, like if you live in a low crime neighborhood and you get your shit broken into, like why shouldn't we be paying you money if we're going along with this whole strategy of, well, we pay you if you don't predict it well enough to buy insurance, which by definition is protecting against risk.
Well, if you want the actual answer behind that, it's that I think climate change is something that the U.S. government has not done an effort to fix. So I think that we're all kind of responsible for it.
Well, how do you expect
it?
that?
Fix global climate change, or is there just
How do
one
you?
country in
How
the
do you
world?
expect? Wait, actually,
Collective guilt. I've heard
how-
this before. It usually puts people in gulags.
Also,
How do
aren't
you-
Floridians like disproportionately responsible for climate change compared to like other people? Why are we benefiting them from what they disproportionately caused by being so wealthy and buying these grand estates?
Go ahead, Nutella.
Yeah, and I mean, how can we expect the government to legislate on something that 10 people in a Discord chat can't agree on? That that if climate change actually exists,
Are you making the case that climate change doesn't exist? I thought we established that.
No, I'm not making the case that climate change exists. I'm just
Do you
saying.
want me to send you sources that it specifically affects this? Because
Are you looking into what I just said?
agree.
Are you just gonna let me? Are you gonna let me talk? Thank
Okay,
you.
go for it.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me a question. You asked me if I believe that climate change exists, and if I'm suggesting that climate change doesn't exist. I'm specifically telling you I'm not.
Okay. So I'm saying that we agreed at the beginning that yes, hurricanes are getting more severe. Me and Fabian agreed on that, right?
Sure.
So if you disagree with that, I can send you the sources right now that that's the case.
No,
You
but
disagree on that.
No, but my disagreement isn't on whether hurricanes are severe. It's how you expect the government to legislate on something that
I'm just
can't be
clarifying that we
agreed
all are
upon.
on the same page.
Okay,
Do
yeah.
we
Yeah, it's
disagree?
called the economic calculation.
Okay,
problem.
no.
You fucking
But what I'm
can't.
trying to ask is, do we at all disagree that climate change is making hurricanes worse?
Yeah,
Yes or
but
no?
I don't think that
No, it seems-
anybody can like really stop it. on,
Okay,
like,
but I'm just trying to
global
establish,
scale.
do we
No
all
single
agree
person
that
can
climate,
stop it.
What was the question you asked? Ashley, I didn't hear it.
do we all agree that climate change is making hurricanes worse and more unpredictable?
I would
I-
say it's likely.
Yes.
I wouldn't say like
Yes.
definitively, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure
I
either,
would say
but
the
yeah.
same thing. Fine, go
I
ahead.
would say it's likely. Like it's
I would say it
more
makes
like
sense.
more likely than not that
Yeah.
climate change has an effect on hurricanes.
Does anyone
mean-
disagree with that? It's likely.
Nobody disagrees with that, Ashley.
Okay, I'm just clarifying, because then if we're talking about government legislation, right?
Yes.
And in terms of like government guilt of climate change, I would say that the US definitely has done bad policies that have caused more climate, like more CO2 to go into the atmosphere than probably
Are we
should.
sure about
I
that?
agree. I agree. The creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and granting immunity from suit to corporations so that it can go through the government for the environmental damages that they cause is something that we should get rid of. And I'm so glad that you're here to ban the EPA with me and allow the market to be able to accurately be able to deal with climate change.
You're one of
Isn't
my
everybody
favorite
who
people
like
on this,
drives
Scott.
like a gas powered vehicle contributing to climate change?
Absolutely.
Well, then why should we be subsidizing the people that are contributing to this thing that you are blaming the hurricane on?
Well, I'm not blaming the hurricane on that specifically. I'm saying that there's like a lot of things that we could do. We could do a carbon tax, right? Like you could look at stuff that like was put forth in the Paris. I forget.
Yeah,
the
but
name.
like-
taxes
like
make
this.
climate change worse, right?
Well, let Dibby handle this.
But
Go ahead,
like,
Dibby.
okay, but like, so if we were to do what you're suggesting, it seems like Sorry, 1 second.
Of course.
Something weird's happened on his end.
Let's save Florida and just deregulate nuclear, please, for the love of God.
Also,
Yeah, we honestly need more nuclear energy. I actually agree with you on
we
that.
should have nuclear energy. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, nuclear energy is
I don't think
actually really
coolness is the argument, or like the biggest argument for nuclear energy.
God, are you for
Well,
nuclear
you know,
energy?
it's good for the environment. I
Okay,
think
I'm back.
it's clean.
Go
We agree
I know
ahead.
on
that there's
something.
no pollution
Sweet.
and
It,
carbon.
it depends how much we deregulate it. But,
So actually, like, so given the fact that climate change is affecting this thing, right? And we know this, and it's been blasted out over the airwaves for decades, right? With like I would say some alarmist like zeal, right? Exaggeration in some cases. So given that's the case, and given that people in Florida or people all over the country have access typically to the internet, to the TV, to the things that are going to show them all the climate change alarmism, they should be aware that hey, hurricanes are more unpredictable. We can't really trust the weather maps, so I should get flood insurance. I should get hurricane insurance. I should get wildfire insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So the fact that we understand that this is being contributed to by climate change, and people have been informed about this for decades. I think the fact that they would like lean on like old knowledge, old flood maps, old etc. Knowing that it's going to be more unpredictable, that it's going to be worse, is just more evidence that they're not being responsible, and that the responsible person listens to the alarmism and gets some fucking flood insurance.
Right.
Yeah, I
but
get-
those
They're
people
homeowners.
have time to listen
This
to
is-
the alarmism. They have jobs.
This is proper resource allocation. Okay, that's all it is. When you purchase property and you are too stupid to get flood insurance, right? You're punished by the market when your house is wiped the fuck out.
So,
Yeah,
okay,
like we have something.
you go first, Doobie, please.
So I do insurance, right? Like that's what I do for a living. I own a brokerage, a pretty large one, and
Mhm.
I've had situations where somebody has a cabin out in the fucking mountains somewhere, right? Doesn't even have an address. Like the address is like a road in like a with like a mailbox on it, like a mile away from where their actual cabin is. And I tell this guy like, hey, this thing costs you $150,000 to put up there. You need to get it insured. No insurance companies will want to cover this fucking thing because they understand that California has a ton of wildfires and this guy's surrounded by trees, so they don't want to insure this. So California has the California Fair Plan, right, which is like a government-backed thing that all the insurance carriers are forced to pay into, to cover specifically these people that can't get insurance anywhere else because no insurance company wants to cover this.
Mhm.
And understanding all that, I can lay it out for them. Say, hey, this area has a wildfire every few years or so. You should get this insurance. $150,000. It'll cost you like $500 a year. It's not that big a deal. They will not fucking do it because they're just dumb. They say, hey, it's not gonna happen. No, it's not a big deal. Hey, if there's a fire, I'll go out there with my fucking water hose. It's fine. Like it's ridiculous, right? So if that's if that's their decision, right? If they understanding the risks, they're in California in the fucking mountains in a cabin with no fucking insurance, then hey, if their fucking cabin burns down and costs them $150,000, then that's on them. Why should I need to pay for them?
Right.
For them to rebuild their fucking cabin.
I also want to point out, just to add to what Doobie's saying, like excess surplus insurance companies exist, right? Like, so even in these like weird places where you're like, oh, maybe they can't get insurance, etc. There are companies, right? Like, oh fuck, what is it?
Lloyd's
James River.
James River,
Right, yeah, there's
really good. Lloyd's really
Right.
good. You can insure fucking anything. They will insure anything
Right.
for the right amount of money.
Exactly. Like there are excess surplus companies where a majority of what they do in insurance, their entire moneymaker is insurance underwriting. Like that's where they make their bread and butter because they take all these gray areas, these weird places, these company like a gas station that's in a super high crime area or something that they couldn't go to Markel and get fucking insurance, but they can go to James River or Lloyd's and they can get insurance. Like there doesn't need to be government assistance for this. Like excess surplus insurance companies do this all the time. And then other insurance companies layer their policies on top of each other so that if like some giant disaster occurs, the company itself has insurance over like a certain amount of millions of dollars from another insurance company that they pay to cover them in the event that something crazy happens. There's no need for government theft in this regard, especially once you add in charity and mutual aid and things like the Cajun Navy, etc. Fact of the matter is that if you want to take this risk, you take this risk.
I'm
It's
reading
really
up
that simple.
Question for
Just
you.
real quick. 1 second. I just want to read what they are. I've never heard of it.
I
Okay.
can
Read-
question
read
for
what
you,
it is.
Scott, while we wait.
Revolution.
So I heard you say earlier that we should let the market take care of climate change. Would you like to expand on that thought for us?
He's the libertarian.
Yeah, but I mean,
He's
it
an
has to
ANCAP.
work in a certain way. It can't work by magic. So I assume he can explain it to us.
And caps.
Yeah,
You're
so
right.
one of the big problems with the reason that there is quote unquote a market failure, even though theoretically a market failure should only describe situations in a free market, and I only think they exist with state intervention. But nevertheless, there is a quote unquote market failure because governments have created the regulations that punish businesses for what it is that they do in terms of pollution. And so, because the state has this control over it, the state is the one that actually allows all of these massive polluting industries to exist. And so they're subsidized by the protection of the state. And so then we create things like the Environmental Protection Agency where we're going to fine them, et cetera, right? But the problem is that then you get regulatory capture. And so we saw this, a great example of regulatory capture where the government actually makes the problem worse is asbestos, right? All of the small construction companies, once we realized how dangerous asbestos was, that were required to do asbestos removal in order to do jobs, they basically went out of business. A lot of residential construction businesses did that, but larger businesses were able to meet the demands that the EPA set up. But if you had a situation where you were able to sue people that poisoned you and actually able to punish people effectively for at the very least first order consequences, I don't think second and third order consequences really work in a framework of natural law, but in first order consequenses. So, you're next to a factory and they poison the water, for example. Instead of having to go through the EPA, for example, the teflochloride, the teflocarbons, right?
Mhm.
They poisoned the fuck out of these people. And the government and the EPA work together with this corrupt system to allow this company to essentially get away with it for 100 years plus and never have to pay anybody because of the way the legal structure is actually designed to protect large corporations that put these politicians in power to begin with. And then what do? We get things like cap and trade in the UK, right? In 1997, they're like, oh, we're going to institute cap and trade systems. And then what we found 10 years later is, hey guys, our carbon dioxide is actually down. Well, not if you actually look at the carbon dioxide from imported things that they manufactured in China, which realizes they actually made the situation worse with cap and trade. And so every time that the government gets in, you have this economic calculation problem where they're attempting to determine the price of goods and resources, and they're also attempting to find the marginal social cost, right? The MSC that changes presumably the price demand equation. And what ends up happening is you have wasted resources that could be going towards innovation, new technologies, and could be punishing the businesses that actually pollute and harm the most.
So that's answer your question, Revolutionary. After that, Ashley, you had something you wanted to add. So, Revolutionary.
I would add a follow-up. So, would you say that we should get rid of the EPA? And if so, what should we replace it with? Because
should
I
get rid
of
don't
the
think
EPA
we've
and we should
found.
replace
Hold
it.
on, let me finish the question. Because I don't think we've gotten to a point where these companies are just going to self-regulate. We haven't really seen an example of that. So there clearly needs to be some system in place.
Yeah, a legal system. Sue them.
Do you think that suing for climate change is a reasonable thing?
I think
Just like-
suing for first order, I think that suing for first order consequence property damage and damage to one's body is reasonable. I think the idea that you
so if
sue
somebody's
someone in a
pumping out
car
CO2,
and then like the CO2 in the car goes in the atmosphere and it's with 7 billion other people, well we'll say 5.5 billion other people also doing some form of CO2 pollution is not a reasonable thing. But I think that if you live next to a factory and they poison your water, or they poison your air supply, or they damage your roof in some regard because of the smog that they're putting out, is perfectly reasonable. And I think deregulation of things like nuclear, which is far less riskier and far better and far cheaper, I think that these are solutions, and I think the market provides these solutions. Yeah.
So I
See,
think
what
what
about companies? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, like, if I live, let's say, like, I live in a area where there's not directly a factory next to me, but I am equally affected by climate change as many other people, right?
Mhm.
Who can I sue for that?
Again, those would be second or third order consequences, right?
But
Like if
like,
I,
who
so if,
what?
listen, hear me
How
out.
would I ever stop a factory that's like not directly next to any property from producing as much like CO2 as it wants?
We have this problem legally currently, right? So like you're familiar with the butterfly effect, right? Where like a butterfly flaps wings and it causes a hurricane in Florida, and floods people that don't have flood insurance, right?
The
So
movie.
right, great movie, right? So let's say I push somebody, and then because I push somebody, um, they're angry and upset, and their rage from the previous assault causes them to speed, and then because they're speeding, they drive into a gas station, and then that gas station blows up, and then because that gas station blows up, and we do this over and over and over again, eventually you're harmed in some way. You can't sue the fucking guy who pushed the guy that got angry, right? Because these are second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth
But then
order
I guess
consequences.
my question would be like, what would the incentive of a company that like has its factories? Let's even give a good example. Like they're off on an island, right? Let's say somebody
Mhm.
sets up their factories on this island, right? And they
Mhm.
produce all the CO2 they want. They produce an insane amount. How would you ever stop them from doing that? You just wouldn't?
If
You
I'm
would
a,
just
if
let
I'm a,
them.
if I'm a if I'm a local fisher, I'm a local village, I could
But
pretty easily
we're
prove
saying
that
an
the
island.
mercury. Listen, I'm pretty sure that I can prove that the damage that they're doing via mercury poisoning in the water is directly impacting and affecting me. That would be a first order consequence if I can prove that they were doing that and that it directly affected my food supply as a business. Right? That's a
But
first order consequence.
I'm saying that there's a lot of these factories. They affect the entire world, right? And that like these
Mhm.
regulations kind of stop that from happening, right? Like it's very hard if
But they
it's not
don't.
directly. Okay, how would you say that they don't?
The fact that they literally don't. I gave an example of the UK with cap and trade emissions in 1997
Sorry,
and
I
how
was
that
reading
actually
during that. I might have missed that.
created more pollution because they offset manufacturing in third world countries where the pollution was worse and then shipped all of those things to them. The state is not in the business of fucking over its rich corporate donors.
Oh, I would actually agree with you. And in terms of current climate acts and stuff, I might be for it if we were to repeal it, if we replace it with something else, or if we
I would say that
improve
I
it.
would say this simply, right? If we had gotten rid of the EPA and we had drastically reduced taxes, FedEx already would have solved algae biofuel in all of our planes by now. But they've had to abandon that research and go and stick with government research because it wasn't profitable for them to be able to do so. But if the American government wasn't stealing 40 to 52% of all of the wealth from people, this is a problem that already would have been solved, at least at the very least, from all planes. And we could all stop bitching about people using private jets to go talk about climate change because they'd be using algae biofuel.
How do
Okay.
you deal with how do you deal with the lawsuits? Because typically companies build in their lawsuits and a fund for that. So if a company can make more money simply doing the pollution and then paying the lawsuit, how do you deal with that eventuality?
I mean, you're
If they can
assuming
just
that
if they lose the lawsuit and they can afford the payment and they make more by doing the pollution and doing business as usual, is there any way in
you
your
proved
system to account for that?
when you get rid of the state that caps lawsuits, right? Because the state does this all the time. They say like this is the maximum
So these
amount
are
you can push.
non-government courts we're talking about?
I'm an anarchist. Welcome to the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay. And
Yeah.
how do
when
we
you get
decide
rid of
what court we're using then?
Okay. Okay. All right.
now you're getting too far into ANCAP. You're getting
Yeah.
too far into ANCAP. So I'll answer this one question and we'll get back on topic. Right? So when you get rid of those systems, if it is true that the damage that they have done is still offset by their own profits, you have proven that the value of the product is more valuable to humanity than the damage itself, and that it's a perfectly acceptable form of damage.
Okay, all right. So we're going to continue on to our next topic. Thank you all for participating in this one. Ashley, put up a hell of a fight, so appreciate you on that one. Shout out to you, our friend.
Can I just
okay.
say, I think everyone should be in favor of deregulating nuclear a bit. Like we definitely should have more nuclear energy. It seems like a really good option, and I think everyone agrees here, and that should be a statement.
I call it
Okay.
the watermelon test. If someone doesn't support deregulation of nuclear, I know they're green on the outside, red on the inside.
Okay. Thanks so much.